Welcome back, everybody, to Radio Free Urbanism, your podcast about urbanism
and stuff.
I'm one of your hosts, Ethan, and today I'm joined with my regular co-host, Sully.
Hello, everybody.
And we also have a guest today on this episode, Hayden, also known as the Transit Guy.
Hi, how are you all? Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
It's great to have you here, Hayden.
Sure.
Well, we have a couple of things to go over this episode today. Do we have anything to start with? Any little announcements, Sully?
Yeah, for our regular listeners, where the heck is Nick? And if you don't know, then you're not a regular listener. So, no, he is in the Netherlands, the promised land, soaking in all the incredible bike and transit and pedestrian infrastructure so that he can return and proselytize the good Dutch word.
The good Dutch word, that's right. Being orange-pilled, apparently, is what it's called these days.
Oh, yeah.
Be careful with that orange color.
Oh, yeah. But, yeah, I mean, it's been, probably about a week and a half since we've done an episode. But it's exciting to be here with everybody, having Hayden on this episode. Not a whole lot of updates coming from me. I will be going to some new transit openings next week, but other than that, you know, it's been pretty uneventful, but we do have a wonderful show, and we do have a lot of questions here for Hayden.
Yeah, Hayden, are you going to be there June 6th? Do you know what's happening on June 6th?
I do not know what's happening on June 6th. Please let me know.
LAX K-Line station is finally going to open.
That's awesome.
After 2 years of delay. 2 years of delay, Ethan, or 3?
I think it was 2 or... It might be 3, honestly.
Okay.
And the craziest part is that the People Mover is not yet opening.
I was just about to say, so I'm like, is it useful to open it without the People Mover? Like, is it an improved... Like, would people still go there versus just taking rideshare or the bus straight to the airport?
I mean, Sully can tell you this about LAX, but rideshare to LAX is not exactly ideal either.
Yeah. You have to go to that one designated place, right?
You do.
Yeah.
And there's a charge, and the traffic is insane. I mean, the question, I guess, it's a similar question to, will people be willing to get off at the LAX station and walk a mile with their luggage? Or vice versa. I think the answer is probably no for the majority of people. I'm actually flying out of LAX to go to the Strong Towns National Convention.
Ooh.
In the evening of the next day. So I actually could use it, but then on my way back, I'm landing at midnight, and I'm pretty sure the trains stop running at midnight. So,
yeah, not gonna help you.
Yeah, that's not gonna.
So if you want to help me do transit planning for my journey right here on the podcast,
yeah, we'll just plot this out for you, Sully.
Yeah, so it's going to be a party on Friday, June 6th. It's going to be all the transit nerds except Hayden are going to be converging.
I'll be there in spirit.
And then there's another opening the very next day in Phoenix with the South Central Light Rail extension. So they're going to actually be turning their little light rail system into 2 lines. It's going to be... That's also going to be a little bit of a party. Probably not as big as the LA one, but it's still going to be fun to see that.
Fun fact about the Phoenix Light Rail for you guys. There was we had a guest lecture in an engineering class at Cal Poly when I was getting my master's last year. This older guy, must have been in his 80s, very nice retired engineer. And he said, I think he graduated, he said, in like 1970 or 75, and he got a job at, I guess, the Phoenix Transit Department or Arizona DOT. Anyway, he said he walked in, and he said, one day there's going to be rail in Phoenix, and I'm going to make it happen. He said he was almost laughed out of the building. But he spent the next 40 years working on light rail. I mean, he was there the whole step of the way. He was such an awesome guy, and he came up with the idea of having it go through those roundabouts that it goes through and designing that. So it was an awesome lecture.
What a baddie.
So, yeah. There are cool guys like that behind it. And as he said, if I could convince a bunch of people in Phoenix who had never even touched a train to build light rail, you could convince anyone of anything. That was his line. It was so
absolutely
cute.
Yeah, that's awesome. 100%. That's really cool. I didn't know that it was opening. I thought it was opening up later in the year, so that's really awesome that it's opening next week.
Yeah, it's going to be super exciting. Hopefully it's not going to be 200 degrees, but, you know, we'll deal with it either way. But, Hayden, tell us a little bit about yourself. I know that we've kind of jumped into our little conversation here, but it'd be great to hear about you.
Yeah, so I am a planner and engineer by trade, or I was a planner and engineer by trade. I went to school for civil engineering, thinking that I was going to like build big buildings and bridges. Bridges was like my real big thing that I really wanted to do after having like a big hankering for like Legos and all that kind of fun stuff. And I went, in your freshman year of engineering, you kind of do, they make you do geotechnical, they make you do environmental, they make you kind of just do all of the types of disciplines and concentrations you can get to see kind of what your path is. And I was really, really, really fortunate that my transportation professor was a pro-urbanist transportation professor. And the first class, I think it must have been like maybe my second week at the school that I went to at UConn, he had like a photo of King of Prussia Mall from like an aerial. And if anyone doesn't know, King of Prussia Mall, I think it's like the third, maybe the fourth, but I think it's the third biggest mall in the country, or in North America. And he had like it just like basically a Google aerial, and he was like, "What's wrong with it?" And everyone was like, "Not enough exits," or "There's not enough trees." Like everyone was like, had no idea like what was wrong with this. We kept asking, we're like, the building roof looks bad, like did not know what he were trying to get at. And then he was like, no, there's like way too much parking, and look how much parking there is in the thing. And it just kind of clicked, kind of like when you see like the Severance when they go into the elevator and get severed. It just kind of like clicked for me. And then I was like, oh wait, I actually want to do this. And so yeah, ever since I've been doing that. I went to Germany to study public transportation operation for a year at the University of Stuttgart, and then came back to the States, where I've worked in California, and both in California and on the East Coast in New York on a bunch of large transit projects, which is like my gig, and I really liked it. But then I found that the consulting world was not for me anymore. And so I went my own way. I started the Transit Guy in 2020 as like my online moniker in order to kind of just talk to people about transit and kind of proselytize and evangelize like people about transit when like lockdown was happening and I couldn't talk to anyone and nerd out with all my normal transit folks because we were locked down. And then it kind of took off, and so now I'm doing that, and I have my own gig, and I'm talking to you two lovely gentlemen. So
notably not a YouTuber. I don't know if you guys caught that.
Not a YouTuber.
Notably
Heavy
not a
on the
YouTuber.
not YouTube.
Wow. One of the first guests of what I'm in here, not a YouTuber, but yeah, no, that's a great story. I think that every year, just from my experience, there are more and more disillusioned engineering students. I think it's still small, but no, it's amazing that you had that professor.
Absolutely. It's one of those things where it's like it just changed like what would have happened if that didn't happen. I probably would have just been
And now you write a lot, far more than any engineer would have. Like, so did you have any creative writing experience, or like that's definitely not something you thought you were going to do?
No, I didn't, but also I was a German major as well because I really don't like, and I know this is kind of like a prickly topic, I don't really like that like when you are a STEM major, you just like completely like ignore like liberal arts. I think that's really kind of silly. And then I think also vice versa the same way, where like I have like a friend who's like was like a fine arts major, and they're like, I can't do math at all, and I'm like, I think you should probably be able to do a little bit of it. So I think that there's kind of like a push or pull there. And so I just always kind of like liked writing and like enjoyed plays and books and all that kind of stuff. So I never had that thing where like some engineers are like, I don't know how to write, or like my script is bad, or I'm an engineer so I can't write. That was never my thing. I don't think I was obviously the best engineer in the room, but I think where I excel, or I think where the transit guy excels, if I could like point to why it has been successful, is I'm able to take kind of like a lot of like technical gobbledygook and explain it at a really, really easy, visceral level for people who like are just tangentially interested in the space. And I am afforded that same right when I like, talk to people about nuclear power or, COVID or like public health. Like I don't know anything about it. And so like when someone's able to kind of give me like the layman's perspective with like a wealth of knowledge, I find that really helpful. And so, if I could do that for someone for transit and cities, that's cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, I remember I had a professor in college who was massively on the breaking down information to be easily digestible to, everyday people, because not everybody is going to be focusing on, the intense, rigorous academics of your interdisciplinary field. So, it's just being able to break that down so that way it's easy to understand what the experts are saying is super essential.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Communication.
Yeah, there's this one
and
guy.
I worded that in the most wordy way.
No, you're good.
Yes.
There's this one guy. I forget his name, and I apologize. But there's this like one guy. Like anytime someone brings up nuclear energy, I'll never forget like when there was like the shelling of the Zaporizhia nuclear power plant. Everyone on Twitter was like, "Oh my gosh, we're about to start another Chernobyl." They're literally like hitting a nuclear power plant, and I remember like immediately going to this guy's Twitter account and being like, what is his thoughts? And like he was like, guys, obviously this is not a good situation, but like nuclear power will not, like, we're not gonna have another Chernobyl for this. And I was like, oh, thank God. And like I followed him and like understood his work, and I'm like, if someone has like a transit question or urban planning question and is like, oh, I don't understand this, I can't make sense of this, and goes to my Twitter account or whatever, one of my accounts, I feel like I've done my job, where I'm like, oh cool, like I'm glad you can trust me enough to know that I can kind of decipher the who and the what.
Well, that's the key thing though, right? You gotta pick who you trust on Twitter. It's not exactly a peer-reviewed,
few and far between.
A peer-reviewed space. Yeah, there are a lot of people who end up trusting the wrong people.
For sure. Yes.
But hey, if they want to trust me, I'll turn them into a bike evangelist just like myself, so that's fine with me.
For sure.
Have you heard the good word of Greenways?
The Little Green Book. Yeah. Actually, no, we have the Green Book, which is actually not such a great book, but in the U.S., that guides highway design. But It was updated recently, right? I think this year, or last year.
I think you're right. I thought it also was up. Yeah, because it was also updated, I believe, in 2021 or 2020. So yeah, I think every few years it's updated.
They included separated bike lanes for the first time.
Yeah, it's always funny when like little wins like that happen, where like MUTCD like wants you to do this now, and you're like, oh, that's awesome, even though it's like still insanely car dominated. You're like, AASHTO has like updated their guidelines, and you're like, okay, cool, I guess I'll take a bike lane in the middle of like a 5-lane road in Pinellas County, Florida.
It's better than none at all.
I guess it's like better than none at all.
Actually, is it? It's an interesting philosophical question. Do you think a useless bike lane actually is worse than none because it actually gets people angry that it exists, and it actually at the same time doesn't actually doesn't induce ridership because it's so terrible? So like, is it worth it to build a bad piece of infrastructure?
I mean, I guess you could also bring this up. I think this also is similar to also like bad transit, right? Like it's like the same thing, where you're like, okay, well, like, the bus comes twice a day. Is it better than it didn't come at all? And I think that comes down to like an equity question of like, well, I'm sure it helps someone, but for the larger like goal of like making transit better, it doesn't, because it's hard to get like political will around like, that thing never works, or nobody wants to take it, or it comes so infrequently, which is my favorite quip that a lot of like anti-transit people will always say is like, well, Amtrak is slow, and you're like, who's saying it's fast? No transit advocate is saying it's fast. That's why we want it to be faster. I don't understand.
I complain it's slow all the time.
Yeah, I'm like, I've never understood that logic. I just feel like it's bad faith to be like, yeah, the thing is slow, and I'm like, correct, like absolutely, like I don't understand.
Like, there's no rule of the universe that trains have to be slow. That's the important thing,
right? I'm always
like if it was a technology that was actually limited by some low speed, then I don't think we'd be interested in it.
Right. I always tell people like the newest iPhone, like the demand for the newest iPhone is not predicated on whether like people like use the iPhone 13 anymore. It's like, so I don't understand why we're doing the same thing where we're like, well, nobody wants the slow train that comes once a day, so we don't need to make it better. And I'm like, okay, I don't know how to like engage with you.
My favorite thing too is that a lot of people do use the slow train that only comes once a day.
Yeah. Yeah, the Borealis is a perfect example of that.
Borealis,
And you're like,
yeah.
if there are enough people who are like, sometimes it's standing only on the Borealis, especially like as you approach the Twin Cities or Chicago. And for people who are wondering, the Borealis is the Amtrak train that opened, I think, 2 years ago, maybe a year ago, 2 years ago, between the Twin Cities and Chicago, and has beaten expectations by a lot. And I know, like, as you get closer to Chicago, for sure, like sometimes it's like standing only. And I think it takes almost 8 hours, 9 hours, the Borealis takes. And so when people make that comment of like, well, nobody, like, it's so slow, nobody wants to take it. And you're like, yeah, but people are willing to take a very slow train that's far slower than flying and taking a car, and it's still almost sold out. So what does that tell you about, like, a train that goes takes half the time and comes every half hour? Like, I don't understand this argument.
I was going to bring that up because I've experienced the same thing with local buses. I mean, I grew up in Santa Barbara. There's a Santa Barbara MTD. Great color scheme, by the way, that they have. Great livery.
We love a good
buses.
livery. Yeah, we love a good livery.
It's inspired by the old streetcar network that closed 100 years ago. Actually, in 4 years, it'll be 100 years ago. But I grew up just assuming no one took the bus. I mean, it's a town of 100,000 people, and I didn't know not even one person who took that bus. But once I started Strong Towns, and I have a friend who refused to learn how to drive, and he took it. He takes it actively. And he sent me pictures. Like, it is, during rush hour, it is packed. Like, because 40 people out of 100,000, you might not know one of them, but it's enough to fill up a bus. I mean, and it's more than 40, right? During rush hour, it's bus after bus after bus for about an hour, and I think it has 20-minute frequency. So it's a few hundred people that totally rely on that thing. Because and it ties into my favorite personal anti-transit quip, which is it costs too much. And it's like, as long as roads are as subsidized as they are, I don't like that argument. It's like, even one of those full buses is less expensive on societal cost than all those people driving. So
yeah, you'll never get me on the transit capital. Like, on the transit capital stuff, a lot of times, like, yeah, I'm like, you do make a good point about transit costs, but like when it comes to transit operating costs, I'm like, you'll never get me on that, because that's crazy. Where you're like, okay, well, how about this? Let's make a deal. I always do this. I'm like, let's make a deal. Transit should run at the same subsidy percentage as highways and freeways. Oh, you don't agree? Oh, okay. Oh, so we're not arguing in good faith anymore. Okay. If they want to do that, I mean, at least if they did that, I'd be like, okay. Like, at least we're honest. Like, if you were like, hey, all transportation modes have to run at this subsidy, I'd be like, you know what? I probably don't agree, but like, fair enough. I can see where you're coming from. But when like there's such a major disparity, and one is like just like a black hole of like money and operation money, maintenance money, all of that stuff, and it's like we don't even blink at it. Yeah, I have a problem.
So like the true libertarian, like all roads should be toll roads, all trains should pay for themselves. I respect it. I respect the committal to the bit. That's what I'll say.
You have a point of view and you're consistent. At least I can agree on that versus like, well, no, you should not. That all of that.
Although then you always have to ask the question, like, should the fire departments pay for themselves?
Yeah, no, you can get very you can get very macro. And like,
which is what used to be the case, when you'd have to pay the fire department when they showed up to your house to put out the fire when they were privatized, 300 years ago.
That is crazy.
Which was not fun. Yeah. But anyway, go ahead, Ethan. Sorry.
No, you Sully.
I was going to say, because we started broad, I have a broad question for you.
Okay.
Because you are the transit guy, so I expect a breadth of knowledge here that I don't have.
For sure. Here we go.
So I want to know, outside of my region, we mentioned earlier the show, I'm very plugged into what's going on with LA Metro, but what is going on across the country? What have you seen in terms of the overall trends? What's the hip new thing in transit that transit agencies are doing? What are the things that are working and not working? I know it's a very broad question, but like, I'm just curious.
Yeah, so you're talking about in America, United States. Okay,
screw the rest of the world. Yeah, whatever. America first.
Include Canada if you want. But, Nick isn't here.
Yeah, I guess. I don't know. I think we're still at war with them. I'm not sure exactly what happened. So one of the coolest phenomena that came that everyone was really nervous about in the beginning, including myself, was, wow, ridership is really down obviously it's still down in certain areas, like, since COVID. But there was this like really kind of big scare that we all had of like, is transit ever going to come back? Are people going to think like transit is like these dirty like things, or like, you could get COVID and sickness and illness and blah 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 blah. And then we started seeing a recovery, but we did not see a recovery with respect to like the normal 9 to 5 at peak hours. That kind of dissipated, and that really still gave me pause, where I was like, uh-oh, like what is happening? But like places like BART that still definitely not come back to their full recovery, have seen far higher weekend trips, as well as Metro North in New York City and LIRR on Long Island, or Metro North in upstate New York and Connecticut, saw far higher weekend trips and off-peak trips than they had seen previously. And so the working hypothesis and thesis right now is that people didn't abandon transit, but since our working patterns have changed with like the 9 to 5 and like being remote, and a lot of people are more remote now, that people are using transit more throughout the day for other trips outside of work. And especially on the weekends, they're using transit more, but they're not kind of coming back to those 9 to 5s. And so I don't see an issue with that. I actually welcome it, because I think it's great for all day service. I will say, I was was waiting for a train that usually comes maybe 4 or 5 times at the 8 a.m. hour, but then twice at the 9 a.m. hour, and then once at the 10 a.m. hour. This transit agency had implemented clock face schedules so that like you were getting the same frequency throughout the day. And it took me a little bit to get used to 2 trains at the 8 a.m. hour, because I missed one and I had to wait 45 minutes for the other. And I was like, before I only had to wait 10 or maybe 15 at most, but now I'm waiting almost 45 minutes for the other one because I missed it. But that's kind of in lieu of, or in sacrifice of, being able to get a train every hour without fail at this exact same time. So clock face schedules has been a really cool thing, and as well as just kind of having like a less reliance on peak hour for the weekends and off peak has been really, really cool.
Yeah, well, first of all, I'd like to get in touch with whoever these companies are that are super into the remote work and the non-9 to 5. Who are these companies? What field are they in? Because in the one where I work, this is not the case, and I've never heard. None of my friends are doing it either. Yeah. I actually think, to push back a little bit on I like to challenge our guests. Right? I like to. Transit sucks. What's your response? No. I think that first of all, what I'm seeing at least in the consulting world that I'm in, is that there seems to be a big push from the top to return to traditionalism in many aspects of the companies, particularly in the 9 to 5. I don't know if it's just the boomers who are like in charge, who are angry that they didn't get to work from home or something. No, I actually do think they genuinely think it affects efficiency, and maybe it does. But I actually looked at some work from home statistics. I actually was in a class where these were presented to me by the professor, and he was trying to sort of break the narrative. And apparently, even during COVID, it was something like 10 or 15% of workers in America were remote, like during the height of it. So do you think that remote work can like fully explain the recovery of transit?
No, but that 10 to 15% they are located in higher income areas and in metropolitans, and therefore their lack of going on to a train that they had to before for work really affects the areas that we do have transit. Right. And so that's
No, I was about to say, what about the income of more lower income workers? They generally have been not on the 9 to 5, and even more so getting thrown off that 9 to 5, and not even having regular shifts. Having different shifts scheduled weekly. Retail workers, restaurant workers, people like that.
Yeah, and I think it's a great point. I think that's one thing that I'm from Rhode Island, and so I make this argument a lot, is like the reason that we need longer service spans is in order to kind of pick up and drop off the people who work on that third hour. And we've seen an uptick at the MTA in New York City of that kind of like third shift recovery, whereas before it hadn't come back. And so Yeah, I totally agree with you. I think, in addition to like having off-peak service, we need to make sure it's as close to 24-hour, or if it's not, at least it's kind of like almost like a BART German style, where the train ends at 12:30 and comes back for like 3, so like someone can still get dropped off at their third shift and come back without any sort of interruption, or at least being able to count on it. So it's a good question. And then the second thing that I wanted to bring up as to things that we've seen is that we've definitely seen a very big uptick in people wanting better rider information, which has been a really, really cool thing to work on and like to see. And rider information being almost everything that any sort of UX and UI. I know like with the MTA, the MBTA, in DC, in LA, and SF, there's been a really big focus on better rider screens, having like a better mobile device, whether it's like the transit app that everyone uses or GTFS, being able to really give the most accurate information, because we were coming from a place where I know you would know, Sully, from like in LA Metro during COVID, like really had a huge ghost bus issue, a really good big ghost bus issue, especially as we were like dealing with a horrendous bus driver shortage. And so
I do have to interrupt you for a second. My computer says it's about to run out of batteries. I should have mentioned this at the beginning of the show, but it's not a problem. I'll join on my other computer. I came home today to find that my computer cord had been like cut in half. I don't even know how that happened.
Are you
How?
Vandalism?
It was working yesterday. It was fully connected.
Sounds like vandalism.
Nothing in this place
That sounds like
has been
sabotage.
stolen.
I feel like we're getting sabotaged by someone for this episode.
Well,
For the viewers out there that are watching this tomorrow, we've been dealing with some technical difficulties, but we shall persevere.
It's a clean cut, right? Like, how did that happen?
I don't know what. You might have made an enemy.
Yeah.
oh gosh. It's probably, well, I don't want to say some anti Stronghouse people, but I'm actually gonna, so that I don't just get randomly cut off, I'm going to join now on my other device. You guys keep going. I'll be right back.
Yeah, of course. Hayden, if you want to continue.
Yeah, so we've definitely seen a big uptick with respect to rider information. That is both on your mobile device, that's in the screen, and then that's also in the vehicle. And so like seeing the advancements around that has been really cool, especially from someone in the East Coast, because you'll go to Boston, you'll go to New York, and you'll go to DC, you'll go to Philly, and you'll kind of see all of those advancements at the same time. That was really cool, that the screens start to look the same. I know Boston has been doing stuff with like elevator outages, and New York City has been doing the same. New York City with the new R211 trains. Now when you are about to like get out, it shows you the station map, which is really cool, or I guess the station diagram. I'm not really sure. Being like, you're in this car, and you're like, here's the staircases, here's where the elevators are, here's blah. That is really cool, and that was something that when transit agencies were trying to get people back, I forget who did it. I cannot remember. It was I don't know if it was an agency or if it was like APTA or some sort of kind of just bigger group who was trying to figure out how to get people back onto transit. And a lot of people were kind of having these kitschy ideas of like, well, what if we have Wi-Fi, or what if we have like, like, I don't know, something else. And we realized that like, no, people just needed better rider information, because we were coming from a place where transit was so like not reliable, and also we couldn't get that information.
Yeah.
So it's really cool to have seen like the innovations that are happening now, with especially around service delays and what that looks like. And I'm really excited for what's coming further on that.
Yeah, I found that to be really exciting, especially where I've lived, but I've also noticed it in a lot of other cities too. Seeing that real-time rider information has been super helpful in just overall wayfinding improvements with a lot of different transit agencies. But one thing that I've noticed has been really growing has been the growth of payment options with transit agencies, especially ones that are starting to allow, debit card, credit card usage, and multiple different ways of payment, even using, like Apple Pay on your phone. I know some other agencies have started up with that, but a lot of other agencies are starting to really adopt that.
Yeah, so we Omni has it in New York City. I think Omni was the first. I think I might be incorrect. Maybe Seattle. No, I think it was Omni. Omni was the first, and then now, as of last year, the Omni is now like basically the same hardware and solution, is Charlie in Boston. And I think as of, was it like Wednesday or Tuesday? DC also now has it. When DC is very interesting, and not to get too nerdy, but DC is a closed system. So
Yeah.
I don't know how it works on the way out, but for everyone who like rides Omni or Boston, you get debited immediately when you scan in. Whereas because DC is zone based for WMATA, I'm not exactly sure. I'm guessing you also must have to cash out, or if you don't, you probably get some sort of like penalty as if you didn't scan your card out. So it's really cool because that payment has always been a really big barrier to entry, at least even for myself as someone who calls himself the transit guy, especially on buses, because like for instance, like
Yeah.
we're going home, when I go home to see my family, I'm always like, right before I get the bus, I'm like, Mom, Dad, do you guys have $2, like $2 bills? And my parents will be like, what? And I'm like, I'm going on the bus. They're like, are you okay? And I'm like, no, I need 2 singles because like the bus will give me quarters back and I don't want to break a 5 or a 10 with quarters, so I just need 2 single dollars. But now, like, as we, it's super easy now. You get on a bus, you don't have to worry about a ticket, you don't have to worry about interfacing with the driver. It's just boop, and you're in. And there's a lot less friction, which is really, really important, especially for station capacity, but also getting people to try transit.
Think about the weight of those quarters being brought on the bus. How much worse does that make the mileage?
Hello?
We gotta really go down to efficiency here.
Exactly. Well, hey, okay, I have actually, it's so funny you mentioned DC and WMATA, because just today, did you see the big news with WMATA? Am I breaking the news to you?
Do you have to bring this up, Sully?
Oh, no. Oh, God. Oh, no.
Here we go. Go ahead.
All right, all the viewers have to know is the name of it might be changed to WMAGA, okay? That might happen.
You know what? I said this before, and I'll eat my words. If Donald Trump wants to improve all transit in America and implement high-speed rail, and we have to call it the Trump train, I am more than happy to take that bet. We could just change it 4 years after, so I don't really care. So let him call it whatever he wants to call it.
Okay, this actually brings me to one of the questions I wanted to ask you, because it's pertinent. So, after the election, one of the people I was most interested in
Which
was
election?
the last one.
That one? Oh, okay. Gotcha. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Oh, you mean the municipal elections going on?
What'd you say?
Dog catcher?
Listen, the synagogue board election was just as interesting, okay? But it was pretty crazy, too. So, no, I was, like, most interested in Sean Duffy, like, who was this guy? Because what he made the policy would directly affect my job, honestly, more than pretty much anything Trump could do, or definitely any of the other secretaries. And what was weird to me at the time was the other secretaries there was a lot more background information on who they were. And they got interviewed and people talked about them and stuff. But Sean Duffy is still, to me, other than the fact that I know he has like 9 kids, which means that he can't fit all of them into a car. Okay, there's something there. But
the bus would be great.
Disappointed in his leadership, in terms of how I've seen it affecting the work that I do. The grants, I was working on a project to make some pedestrian at-grade rail crossings safer with improved lighting, signage, and like safer arms that come down because they were super old. Like that got canceled, right? Because it was woke. Because it had some section on equity or whatever it was. And to me, I'm like, I don't understand when that became in any way political, like saying you want fewer people to die while walking across train tracks. So I don't know if maybe this stuff was all at once because of Doge, and maybe they'll walk some of it back. But what's your take, Hayden, on what's going on? Who is Sean?
What's casual things. Well, I don't really know who Sean Duffy is. All I know is that he started off as like a reality TV contestant. I don't know if that's the right word, like kind of like a real world type thing. I think it was called Road Rules. I think that was the show he was on. And then he became a congressman in Wisconsin. He was there for a little bit. And then I think he left to go I don't know if he got voted out or he might have just stepped down. I don't know. So don't quote me on that. But then he was a Fox News host. And now he is the transportation secretary. To be fair, and I'm not being fair to him, but I'm just saying to be fair, the transportation secretaries have never really been picked with like merit in mind or expertise.
Yeah, I don't think
Outside of like Ray LaHood, who was
Yeah.
like in the 2000s, we really haven't had anyone, including Mayor Pete, who I thought was a great transportation secretary, Anthony Fox and all that stuff. Like, we never really had transportation secretary who's like an expert on transportation, and that to me is like a problem. So I will put that outside because I do want to be fair that it's not like we've been picking people. I think under the guise of like merit is back and meritocracy is back, picking Sean Duffy was a crazy decision, obviously. And I think the big problem that I kind of happy to talk more about later is we are in a phase of anti-intellectualism and also anti-institution, and from there, there is broad support to cancel things that, like, even if they make perfect sense, are easy fodder to cancel. And like for the last, I don't know, 12 years, every 4 years the DOT has had a different a different direction. So like under the first administration, like it was like highways, and you really couldn't get many transit projects through. And then on the last 4 years with Biden, under Secretary of Transportation and Polly Trottenberg, to get a highway through was actually kind of hard, even though we were like, they were still happening. There was a lot more like stringent around greenhouse gases and like how to make it multimodal. So that all of those things were happening. And then now obviously now we're at a place where like bike lanes are woke. So this is just kind of a phase, and I'm in a place of like hopium a little bit, where I'm like, the emperor has no clothes. A lot of these things are stupid, and where bike and pedestrian projects are canceled, I think it's a great place for the states to fill in, because that money is not that expensive relative to like other projects like transit projects and stuff, where like you do kind of need a federal share. A lot of those projects can be taken on by the state, and I'm not advocating it for as like we should do that going forward, but like kind of as a place of, instead of waiting for 3 years and being like, well, we can't get those done, I think that's where the states really need to step up. But yeah, we're just kind of in a place where like bike lanes woke. And you just kind of need to be in a place where you just kind of like ridicule it, where you think it's stupid. I was supposed to go down in DC. I was supposed to go down to DC. I want to say it was in March. I think it was the end of March. I was just go to DC to like advocate for Amtrak, and I decided to cancel that trip because I thought it would be the most useless thing ever to go down there and try and like speak to Congress people when like this was like at the height of like Doge and like Congress doing absolutely nothing. So that's kind of how I decided to go about it. I was like, I think we're just in a place right now where like whatever Duffy and Trump want, they will probably get. But it's a little bit of an emperor has no clothes moment. And it seems like Amtrak was saved for now, at least. So that's where we are at the moment. Amtrak, I do know Amtrak did get layoffs, especially at the managerial level. I have not seen anything yet from all my sources on Capitol Hill that Amtrak's funding will be cut. Knock on wood on that. So that's kind of where we're at the moment. I don't think we're going to see a transit renaissance in the next 3 years. But I think the best case scenario, at least for the next 3 years, is kind of just like everything is where it was left. I know that's not probably the greatest thing people want to hear, but at least on a federal level, like, just don't touch anything is kind of like where I think is our biggest win at a federal level.
Shout out to City Nerd. I think it was just yesterday he released a video of his top 10 projects that will probably not be getting funding from the feds. And they were all interesting projects. And what's funny is that most of them weren't bike lanes. They were like creekside bike paths, like recreational. One was to connect to the Beltline in Atlanta. So they weren't even necessarily, I mean, a few of them narrow roads and stuff, but one was a pedestrian bridge over railroad tracks. So it's just kind of weird that stuff like that is getting canceled. Because obviously the greatest hypocrisy, right, is if it really was in the name, and we discussed this on a few episodes ago, if it was in the name of saving money, the $60 million Houston to Dallas high-speed rail would not have been canceled. The $20.5 billion Texas DOT would have been looked at instead. So it's obviously hypocritical, but there's also, I feel like there's hypocrisy coming from the other side. And this is, again, to challenge you as our guest. because as much as I am annoyed would be the light word, right? As much as I'm annoyed by what Duffy and the people in charge right now are doing, I also, I live my whole life. I've lived in cities that have been run by Democrats since long before I was born. Whether it's big cities like LA and, all the crazy things going on with LA Metro, or even at a state level with California High Speed Rail, or small cities like Santa Barbara. And, bike lanes in Santa Barbara have to fight tooth and nail for every inch of lane. And everyone on the street on it and everyone around them, and you can look at the census data or whatever it is, right? Your neighborhoods that are 85% Democrat, and yet you cannot paint that ground. So I don't even know, are we, because of who's in charge now, is it making the other side look rosier when in fact sort of the bike lane, the people like us, people who listen to this podcast, are we more just on our own even than we think? Or am I sort of extrapolating too much?
No, I don't think you are. I think what you're opening up, the conversation you're opening up is currently a civil war on the left, between kind of like the abundance faction and the populist faction. If I have to hear it one more time, I'm going to go crazy. But a lot of times you bring it up and like, I'm like, well, sure, like the federal government, has a lot of flaws at the moment, but also like, we don't have a lot of transit champions. We don't have a lot of project delivery champions. We don't have a lot of like people who are really following through with like the doctrine they believe in. Like San Francisco, literally they put in their charter that they are a transit first city. Where's that been? Like, where has that been? And so like things like that, I'm like, that's kind of where I think right now, if you are on the left or center left or however you advocate for, I think that's kind of what the next fight over the next 3 years is, like really trying to clean up shop in a lot of these areas where like, okay, actually put your beliefs to the test. You believe in bike lanes, you believe in this, you're outraged that Sean Duffy canceled it, cool. So then you do it and you show the bike utopia that we've all wanted. You show the transit utopia you all wanted. You show the affordable housing unit you all, and the pedestrian and all of those things. You lead by design. And I think that's really, really important. And I think that's what we need at the moment, especially given like, I think like, I forget his first name. Mayor Khan in London comes to mind, where like he really put his like butt on the line for congestion pricing and working on that, and like then making improvements in biking and all of those things, and then like obviously like to the Queen, Mayor Anne Hidalgo. She was like, hey, all of you people going to these like C40, all the C40 mayors that are like going to like make better, environmental climate change policy, I'm actually going to do it. And like she did, and she's built more bike lanes than I think all of the 39 mayors globally who showed up to be like, yes, we're going to be more green. And so I think that's like really where our power needs to go. And I know like a lot of times, you're on social media, people are like, oh, well, like, what are you, like some raging like MAGA Republican? And you're like, no, I'm just like, I'm seeing like where I can make the best argument right now. And I think the best argument is like for us to clean up our house and really like fix, the cities that we can in order to like make this, like to showcase this so that like Anne Hidalgo and Mayor Khan, every time they put these things to a vote, they win now because people did not believe them before. And since their like tenure, more and more, there's been more and more support. There's been more and more bike usage. There's been more and more transit usage. There's been all these things that like couldn't happen before, but it also takes a lot of local leadership to like actually do something. And I'm like, if I see one more board of supervisor in LA, the LA board of supervisors like literally like, hey, by the way, look, we added in this, and it's like an 8-lane street, and they're taking a photo in front of an 8-lane road, and I'm like, what pedestrian improvements did you make? And so like really it's at a local level, and I think a lot of times we use federal policy and even state policy to kind of mask our own failures around like holding these people to the fire, because like the outdoor dining that got canned in New York City for the most part, that had nothing to do with Trump, that had nothing to do with Congress, that was completely on New York City Council and Mayor Adams. So all these things are a local issue, and we should really focus on local issues.
And the reasoning behind, I mean, we have parklet haters too over here, and I just cannot wrap my mind around why 20 people sitting in one parking spot making the city money with taxes is less important than that car that's sitting there that has an turnover rate of an hour.
Yeah.
That is a battle. I can't, a lot of the battles I can understand the other side, and that one I just don't get it. I don't know what the payoff is.
The one I can't understand is the slip lane conversions. I mean, it's kind of in the same boat there, where you take out a slip lane and you make it into a space for pedestrians.
Thank you for calling it a slip lane, by the way. Because everyone always calls it a free right, and I've always called it a slip lane. Or sometimes they're like a K turn. I was like, I've never heard of that. So I appreciate
I've
you.
never heard slip lane. So
thank you. Okay.
But okay, you mentioned cleaning house, and I'd like to ask the nuts and bolts of cleaning house, or sort of the things that are beneath that, because obviously looking at the Anne Hidalgo story, as you called her, the queen, and I like that. She's maybe the bike queen, or if you're the transit guy, she's the bike queen,
and she deserves it. She deserves it.
I mean,
I think
she's definitely done some good transit work too.
For sure.
Yeah. The important thing to remember with her though is like she was elected and didn't hide what she was like. I'm pretty sure during her election she said, "I'm going to get rid of 10,000 parking spots. I'm going to do these things." And I think obviously there's some critical mass that you need in a city which is actually why I'm super excited about e-bikes, for instance, because now I see people biking who never biked before, and they actually are starting to notice, hey, that intersection is really like crazy to bike through, and they never would have thought about it before. So, I don't know exactly the month by month fit, of how Anne Hidalgo won and all that, but I think there is sort of a wink wink thing with the whole abundance agenda too. Of in some way, and I'm going to phrase it very bluntly, but like ignoring community input is like the bluntest way to put it. And it's weird because like the professors I had, especially the older professors who were raised in the Jane Jacobs tradition and who hold her up as a paragon, and she is. I mean, she was a queen of her own time, right? But the whole story is sort of hinged on community input. Like if only there had been more community input, we wouldn't have had these freeways blasted to the neighborhoods. That's actually probably true and stuff like that. But it's weird to now shift the narrative into, well, actually, the community input, when the minority, like disadvantaged community comes to the community meeting and they say, we don't want a bike lane or we don't want transit. Now what do we do? Because we set ourselves up to put community input as the most important part of the process. But I see that actually as, and I don't want to sound like a, I don't know if fascist is the right word, but like I don't want to seem like I don't care what people have to say. But it's like, yeah, how do you balance those things? Like, what in your opinion, like at some point, when do you start ignoring people versus like letting them govern their neighborhood? I don't know.
It is, and it's a good question, and it's something I think we're facing now. But one of the things I'll say is that I think it is a chicken or the egg situation. And the reason I say that is because, as I said before, we are in an age of anti-institution. And that's not just at a federal level. That is at every level, everywhere. And when we were advocating for congestion pricing, the biggest talking point that we had from our opponents was not about like the cars and if it would be effective. The biggest issue that we had to deal with, and I had to deal with all the time, was we don't think that the MTA is going to do what they say they're going to do. And what do you do with that, right? And so that's the hard part, is you have to put in the work, and like locally, we need to really like deliver the projects we say we're going to, in the way we say we're going to, in the timelines and budget we say we're going to, in order to like lend us the political will in order to keep doing said projects and expanding in said projects with the expectations that we've promised we are going to do with the public. And I think that's a big problem, is that like we just don't have that community trust, and we have to build it back. I was listening to a focus group about Donald Trump presidency, and it was like swing voters, and like I was like, oh my god, all these people are going to be like, we've been here for 100 days. This guy's cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs. Obviously, they're going to say he's like really bad. The thing that a lot of them said that pushed me back was like, they were like, but he's doing what he said he was going to do. Like, he said he was going, like, all the things he's doing, I'm not shocked of. I'm shocked that he's doing it, but like, he did say he was going to do them. And so like, we have the opposite problem on the left. I'm trying to say we, like, I don't want to include anyone, but like, on the left is the opposite problem, where like, there's so much like being so timid to do anything, to actually follow through with the things that we say we're going to do, when voters will actually reward you for it. Like, that's what they said they were going to do. And so I think that is kind of like where we need to find the balance of like actually doing those things. And because if we don't do those things over time, it, like, there are times where I've said the same thing to friends where I'm like, I don't know if I'm going to vote for like a Democrat in the New York City election. Like, I was like, it's Eric Adams or this? Like, I don't know. Like, so I'm like, sometimes I'm trying to figure out like what is the best way we go forward at a local level where we actually deliver things, because when you're in these big cities that you're talking about, they're not run well. I think we can all admit they're not run well. Whether they're ideals that like we voted them in for, or, like we agreed, we can't sit here and be like, yeah, the biggest cities in America right now are like really, really well run. Chicago has a mayor who's like got a 6% approval rating. We have Eric Adams in New York. Must I say more? We have LA having issues where they can't rebuild and they're not going to be ready for the Olympics. And then we have Houston, where the budget deficit is all more than $1 billion. Like, it's like, what are we doing here? There's no place, there's no shiny beacon on a hill, not to use Ronald Reagan's word, but there's like no shiny beacon on the hill that we can like hang our hat on and be like, you want to vote for us? You want to see like what we're going to do? That's what we want to do.
Actually,
we want to do that.
I would disagree with
What
you
about
there. The Villages in Florida is
Oh.
a great community.
I'll take your word for it.
The crazy is the other side. What is their beacon on the hill? Is it Alabama? With the lowest life expectancy? And no, I think the closest thing that anyone has to the beacon on the hill is that, to go back to that stupid New York Times article from however many weeks ago, those Dallas suburbs, which are neither right nor left. They're probably purple. Which actually I think purple is really healthy for a community to have people having that discourse. And they get, as Stronghounds would say, they're at the beginning stages of the growth Ponzi scheme, so they have the illusion of wealth. So it looks great. It's actually not. But that's the closest thing that any community has to look at us. We accommodated all these people with all this new housing. And you're right, none of the big cities could say that, and none of the rural areas either really have any success stories, to be honest. I mean, that's where the lowest education levels are and all that stuff.
Because you bring it, but the thing that you bring up, Sully, is that on the right, there's two things. One is that all of their spheres of influence are not in the media. So all of the places that the media is located in are in Democrat cities. So they are always affronted by the quality of life issues or just general issues because they are living in New York. I mean, Fox News is in Midtown, right? So they're in the belly of the beast when it comes to New York. They're not in Charleston, West Virginia, or wherever, Wichita, Kansas. So they're not in these other places as much. And in addition to that, when you run on government bad, look what they're doing, look how they're not making anything better, that's all your platform has to be. You don't have to show a place to thing. You're just not that. And I think that's the problem with being more a pro-government party is when the government doesn't deliver, that's all you have to be is we're not them. Unfortunately, that's just kind of how it is. I mean, obviously, I did a lot for upcoming November election last year. I did a lot to try and change the results, but it didn't work.
Yeah. Ethan, what about you? Do you think is Portland a good example of a well-run city, or do you have complaints?
Oh boy, I don't think that I can say that Portland is a great, shining beacon of a hill for being a well-run city. It's got some parts that work. But then, of course, we also have a massive housing crisis here at the same time. And, stagnation just due to, the pandemic and a lot of, just overall... 2020 hit Portland really hard. And it hit a lot of cities hard, but I think it really hit Portland hard. And it's just dealing with a city that's not growing at a rate that it was at, even 10 years ago is really just trying to kind of figure out where your footing is, and of course having a bunch of problems at the same time, like housing, and as well dealing with transportation as well too is a major issue.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
No, and I say this all the time. This is even before the election. I am a transit advocate who never faults people who always drive or who Ubers or whatever. I really don't. The reason I don't is because I am of the belief, and I think everyone should be of the belief, but at least I am of the belief, is that when you walk out of your house, you are in a free market of transportation, and you are trying to figure out what is the best way for me to get to my destination, wherever it will be. If it's get milk down the street, if it's to go to the Beyonce concert, it's just to go to work, it's just to pick your kids up, whatever it needs to be. You look and you say, what are all the options? I'm going to take that. Oh, I'm going to go to the Beyonce concert. Parking's going to be terrible. I'm going to take the train. I'm going to walk here. Oh, it's a nice little walk to the milk. I'm going to go walk down the street. I am not of the belief that people who drive cars are doing it in order to do something anti-transit. I do it. I believe that they're doing it for that. And so the same way that I see all these people who live in Long Island or wherever, suburb, and you said, Sully, I forget the name of the the place, I saw the article too, where they're building in the suburbs of Dallas and in Austin and San Antonio. They're doing that because they can't live in the city because it's too expensive for them to live there, right? And so they are making a free market decision to live where it's cheaper, and I don't fault anyone for doing that. And so I think that is a big problem, is like, I think a lot of times, especially in urbanist circles, we think that people who are living in the suburbs or drive all the time are doing it because they are inherently anti-transit, and I do not think that is even remotely the case. And when you do that and you're like, oh, actually, you know, we're going to do congestion pricing, or we're going to take parking away in front of your work, those things are hard-fought battles. But a lot of times people are making free market decisions that like work for them on their economically, time-wise, and whatnot. And when you're taking it away but not providing other options or fixing the structural problems as to why they had to take that car to work, you're just pissing them off, and you're not like creating any sort of like umbrella platform that like or movement that we can like all work together on. And I think that is a big problem that I see a lot of times. It's like people are like, well, no, they shouldn't be able to drive, or like, well, there should be no cars there. Or I had someone in my DMs be like, all of 95 should be gone and it should be a bike lane. And I was like, I need you to touch grass immediately because that's crazy. So it's like things like that.
Yeah, I actually responded to a comment on one of our more recent episodes where a guy asked me, or asked us, I guess I should say, but he said, I want to move out of this inner city neighborhood because the school here sucks, and I want my kids to go to a good school, and I can afford to move to a suburb where the school is really good. Mm. Am I? Mm-hmm. And then he asked the question, am I disinvesting in the neighborhood? Like, am I part of the problem? And it's a YouTube comment, so I don't know if he was being sarcastic or not, but I answered it in a genuine manner. Mm. And I said, no. Society has failed you. You haven't failed society. Like, of course, a father's like number one goal is to give his children a good upbringing. So like, why on earth, out of some sort of weird, and I've met a couple of people like this actually, like who insist on staying in the bad neighborhood just to show that they want to live in the city, you know, or whatever. And it's like at your kid's expense, like so that they don't get as good as an education. You know, I don't think it's your fault. I think that society, like you said, like in terms of transit choice, like it's society's fault, the government's fault that there aren't more choices. And yeah, no, and even here, like convincing people to take transit in LA is hard because it just takes longer. But at the same time, that also means there's hope. And this is literally what my thesis was about. So you're totally talking to the right person. I'll talk about Houghton again, where Nick probably has recently been. But yeah, it's that city where they designed it around bike lanes. And like the people there use the bike lanes because their front doors open onto them. And that's pretty much it. Like, it's just easier to use them. So we can retrofit places to be that way. And going all the way back to the public comment thing, I think that, like you said, people are sort of affirming that they want this. I think the greatest example of people affirming that they want change at a citywide level rather than a neighborhood level is over 60% of people in LA voted for Measure HLA, which enforces the construction of bike lanes. And so you'd think that people in power would be like, okay, I'm really confident now people want this. It's over 60%. I'll go ahead and do it. And yet, since it was passed, they've done like less than 3 miles. They're still nervous about that one prominent business on the corridor or whatever it is complaining. And that speaks, apparently that's still worth more than that 60%. So I think that we need to move from the like block by block question asking, like, do you want a bike lane in front of your house, to, you know what, 60% of the city said they want bike lanes, let's build them. Like, I'm sorry if this one particular block has someone who doesn't want them, but like, don't live in a city if you don't want anything to change.
Yeah. It's kind of like the whole Great Highway in San Francisco, where, you know, it's a major city park, right? Or it's a major, not park, but it was a, you know, it was a roadway right along the waterfront on the ocean in San Francisco. And a majority of the city wanted it closed, but a couple of the very closest neighborhoods wanted it to remain open. But at the end of the day, I mean, it's really all up to, you know, the municipal decision on that one, because it's a space for the public, and not just people in the neighborhood are going to be enjoying it.
I'm glad you brought this one up, because this one I am very 50-50 on the Great Highway. I totally understand why the local people who are close to it, who drive it every day, are pissed. And I also understand that, like, if you're on the east side, you're 7 miles away, it's never going to affect you, but you'll benefit from it. So I understand the argument, but I was funny today. because they are trying to recall the supervisor who represents the Sunset, because he also was in favor of it, and like the people who I guess of his district are trying to get him recalled. And I just I just replied and I said, I totally agree. We should reopen the Great Highway. In fact, I think we should get all of the Sunset, all of the western freeways that were never built, and I think we should build all of them, including the one that goes through the Panhandle and through Golden Gate Park. I think we should build all of them because, if you're here defending this freeway from existing, from whatever science is behind it, that science also included those freeways as well, and I think you should respect that and build the whole thing. And they were like, well, no, we don't want those. And I was like, oh, okay, gotcha. So like just this freeway, but not the other freeways that were supposed to connect to it to make it better. Oh, okay, gotcha. Now I know your limits.
I think the funniest part about the Great Highway in San Francisco is that it was shut down a lot of the time purely because the dunes were blowing onto
Constantly.
the actual roadway constantly.
Yeah.
Which is why I'm even confused what kind of a park it's going to be. Like, won't the no matter what gets put there, even if it's nice landscaping, aren't the dunes just going to cover it up? Because I visited.
Well, I mean,
yeah, that's the thing. That's the thing. I think we keep kind of just circling around and talking about is like I think they need to really like make the park happen as quick as possible to show it, because right now it's just kind of a highway that's abandoned. So like it's not a great park right now. Like I don't think anyone, even who was pro for it, like it's not great. So like actually making the changes as quick as possible to show like how great it is the thing we need to do, right? So
great.
Let's get that done quick.
Great highway. No, but I think that goes always back to every car driver, including myself when I'm driving, right? Everyone wants to drive because it is fast and convenient, but also everyone driving doesn't want anyone else to be driving because that makes it less fast and convenient. So it's the weirdest mode of transportation. And I also understand, I think you mentioned this earlier too, Hayden, it's like we also need to prove that we're still good at building transit. So like I almost wish that like a closure like the Great Highway was paired with a requisite transit that roughly paralleled that journey or the demand that street was carrying. Because people are right, they probably will use parallel streets, the people who used to drive there. But that's the weird thing I think that I've seen in modern planning is like that simple granular stuff, like closing a road or painting a bike lane, or doing bulb outs. Like anything on roadways is still relatively easier than like designing and building the transit that would theoretically replace that demand.
For
and
sure.
I don't know how, I mean, transit's always going to be more expensive, right, than like roadway projects, but I don't know how that's probably a whole other topic. We've been talking for a while.
That's a book.
How do we lower, like,
we have been talking for a while. I think we probably should start wrapping this up. Sully,
yeah, I don't know. If we want to end on this thought, but like, what are your thoughts on, it's obviously talked about a lot, but like lowering the cost, of the Second Avenue subway, great example, right, or whatever, promising that MTA will actually spend the money they get from congestion pricing in a normal manner.
Yeah, I mean, this is literally there's a book, wink, wink, that I'm thinking about when it comes to this question. But I mean, I just released one 2 weeks ago about on Substack about the reason it costs so much to build, and it's like a series. But the first one is like we overbuild, we really overbuild. We don't have any sort of standardization at all. So like when originally when BART was built, it was built to like a standard kind of. If you didn't see the signage, you kind of didn't know what stop you were in. Same thing, especially with Washington Metro, and especially with New York City, especially with around which company built them. You kind of knew it was just kind of it's easier to have some sort of standard design. Whereas when we built Central Subway, it was like a clean slate for every single one. And from that, there's so much design and planning that goes into it. And that's why I think with Central Subway, I found that it was like the stations cost $1.4 billion to build out of the $1.9 billion project. Like that was a massive chunk, as well as Second Avenue Subway, the phase one. Ready for this? Phase one, the back of house. Like, so for anyone who knows, back of house is like of the station that was built, the stuff that you don't see, all the offices, whatever, mechanical rooms, all those things. of the 3 stations that were built for phase 1, most expensive subway project mile ever, it was 242,000 square feet of back of house space. Now, to put that in perspective, a average Walmart is 190,000 square feet. So it was 50,000 square feet bigger than an average Walmart. And so when you're doing that and you're digging, obviously it's going to cost way more. They've learned their lesson a lot with phase 2. With phase 2, they're able to shave a ton off of the back of house, and it cost almost $1.4 billion in savings by doing that. So that's number 1. Number 2, we need to start learning how to build things in-house. It's a massive problem for California high-speed rail. It's a massive problem for all of our transit agencies. We have no dedicated way of like a very, very well refined, functioning in-house expertise that can build projects at scale and then also do the project management of it, the design, the engineering, and the follow-through of it. We do not have that in this country at all. I cannot stress that enough. I know for California high-speed rail, there was a transit project I was working on in which we had to fly people in from the Netherlands, where I guess your co-host can talk to them for. We had to fly them in a lot in order for them to help us with the transit project we were working on, because we did not know how to do it in the States. And so that's crazy. And that is just another reason. So for instance, in Italy, I think it's about 80 to 90%, in Spain too, 80 to 90% of all of the transit project is done in-house by a roving team of engineers who know Italy, who know the cities, who know the standards, who know the specifications, and they work for the country or the state, and they just build subway projects all day. That's all they do. Once that subway project's done, they move on to the next transit project, and they already have that knowledge. Whereas in America, if we were doing that, it is hi, consultant, nice to meet you. We're starting off scratch. Here's all of our documentation. Here's how we do all our specs. Here's how you do everything. Here you go. Help us. And so when you go out to bid something, if you bid a project like an LA Metro project or whatever, you're bidding it with the design being 10% done versus 90% done. And in between that 10% and that 90%, that 80% right there, lies a massive cost overrun because you are designing the thing that you are telling people. And that's a big problem, especially in Rhode Island. One of the bridges was about to fall down, so the federal government gave a bunch of money to rebuild it, and the governor at the moment is in the hot box because they're build this bridge. We need this bridge again. It's a massive highway bridge, and the design right now is at 10%. And because of that, they had their RFP responded of $450 million difference between all of the respondents because we don't know what kind of bridge. You haven't designed it, so we don't know what we're estimating. Massive problem, and we do this constantly. So those are kind of the things that I think we need to focus on. And then also our environmental review is crazy. Our environmental review is crazy. Do you guys have any idea? Do you know what Link 21 is for Northern California? The Northern California project. It's basically the second Trans-Bay Tube project of northern 21 counties, right?
And I know about environmental review because I have a friend who does environmental planning. And he's against environmental review.
Okay, well,
it's insane.
If he works in the project, he's very rich. Do you want to guess how much the environmental and planning cost for the second Trans-Bay Tube project for the Link 21 project?
Literally a tunnel under the dirt, under the bay. So
under the water.
Right, so it's not touching anything.
But also, my favorite part of it, and this is we were just talking about the last point, the options for the planning are: do we want standard gauge rail between where high-speed rail would be at Salesforce to Oakland, or do we want it to be BART, only BART, or do we want it to be both, or do we want it to also be freight rail? So right now, you don't even know what project you want. Mm-hmm. You have no idea. These are completely different projects.
Yeah.
But outside of that, right? Because how much do you think the planning and engineering, the design and engineering is going to cost for the project?
100 mil.
I'm going to guess 400 mil.
$900 million. For a document.
For multiple.
For a document.
Can I just say it? Duffy's right.
But like for a document, because but also I'm like, my big problem with it is you are studying different goals. You are studying whether Amtrak should connect to San Francisco or Caltrain should go to Oakland, or that BART should go down to Gary Boulevard down San Francisco and connect through downtown and into Oakland. And you're studying whether it should be a hybrid, and you're studying whether freight. So you don't even know what you don't even know what you're trying to do for this project, and that's my big problem.
Yeah.
You do the engineering when you say, "Hey, listen, we have a team of experts. We talked to BART, we talked to Caltrain. Here's what we want to do. We want to do 4-track subway train tunnel main line, and we want 2 tracks to be to BART, and they're going to be X, Y, and Z, and this is what they're going to do. And this, what's the environmental?" That I can work with, but this is like, we don't know what we want. Let us know what you think we should do for these 21 counties to be connected. And to be fair, it's the second Transbay, but it's also a few tertiary projects that are not as substantial. But I'm like, $900 million for this document. Who's going to read it?
This is where I'm actually in favor of AI. I've read enough planning documents and seen how similar they are that honestly, we don't need human creativity. I'm talking not
I actually agree with you on this one, actually.
No, I'm serious. I think whoever, and this is my call out there, whoever creates a planning specific AI, there is more than enough data to train it on. But I don't know what, some very large percentage of planning documents, environmental review documents are all the same. And I've seen one where there's a project that drags on, or it's a different segment of the project, of a freeway. Mm-hmm. And the first 100 pages are the same as the last one. But we still rewrite it because it's describing the same freeway in the same place and the same thing, and then we only, So I'm like, AI for this, please.
Yeah, I agree. I do think AI can help. I think where AI could really help is there are so many resources and just data sets that are just static and they don't change, and every time a project has to happen, we have to spend money to find those data sets, which are really stupid. I'll give you an example. If you are in Palo Alto and you want to build a rail line, just for instance, right? You want to build a parallel rail line to Caltrain. There's there's a bird, there's this monarch butterfly, there's a piping plover, there's a squirrel, blah, 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 blah. They always have a list of endangered species. That list very seldomly changes, but every single time a transit project, a transmission project, a housing project, whatever it may be, happens within that vicinity, some environmental planning vendor has to find that information and add that in, and it's the same data set. So it's well, how great would it be if AI or some sort of place could just have that information, so that immediately when you do this, it automatically spits out that the monarch butterfly is going to be a problem and here's how to mitigate it, versus let's do discovery on how this will be. It's very annoying. And it just cuts out the bloat.
I think we have to cut the show there, as we've been talking.
Yeah, sorry.
For a long time.
We love the monarch butterfly.
Yes.
We do love the monarch butterfly.
Love.
It's wonderful.
Big fan.
Got to go to that mountain in Mexico where they all go and lay eggs and stuff like that.
You got to come in Santa Barbara. We have a monarch butterfly forest where they stop off for a month, I believe April, before they keep going north. And it's a eucalyptus tree forest, which is really interesting because there weren't eucalyptus trees in California 200 years ago.
They're not supposed to be. So,
but there's this forest. It's super weird. The eucalyptus forest is protected because the monarchs use it. Yeah. And I'm talking about tens of thousands of monarch butterflies in a couple acres of forest right next to the ocean. And there's one tree in particular where they all gather all winter. And
wow, that's crazy.
And it's weird because they are not the same monarchs from the year before. So how do they even know how to get there and to that tree? And
it's crazy. I think Ethan is frozen.
Oh, and he disappeared. Okay,
right.
Well, I will close out the show then. Do I even know how? Or I think that's Ethan's job.
We'll figure it out.
All right. Well, feel free to leave, and we'll cut the end. Goodbye.
All right. It was good to talk to you, Sully. Thanks for having me.
All right. And
I'll
Hayden,
see you at Strongtowns.
I'll be in touch with you. Yeah, about that.
All right. Good to see you. Thanks for having me. Bye.